Hi, Rob here again with another video. Okay, so this one is about the drum clinic that me and Steve White did last week, I think it was now, over on the very, very sunny and beautiful Isle of Wight. My God, it was just gorgeous. And I'm sure even when it's raining there, it's still gorgeous. So all this came about after someone called Mark contacted me. He was going to remain Mark W because I don't know how to say your surname, Mark. And he wrote to me after Steve and I did the masterclass at the Swan Theatre in Yeovil, December 9th last year. And he said there's someone on the Isle of Wight, a guy called Del Seymour, that would be interested in hosting a clinic. And apparently Steve had already worked with Del before a couple of years ago. So I said, yeah, great. So anyway, shared our email details. I contacted Del, and then before you know it, me and Steve are booked to do a masterclass on the Isle of Wight. And it was, I've got to say, I always say this, but the drumming community, blah, 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 I always say this, but it's true, is the best. They come out and they support each other, and they are just wonderful. So from contacting Del and letting him know what the situation was with me and Steve, he was like, yeah, let's make this happen. Boom, date goes in the diary, me and Steve are ready to go. So my journey started really well. I had to go to the studio first to pick up a few bits. So I popped in to see Nick at Narm Studios first, and then made a very sort of slow and leisurely kind of trip down to Lymington, which is also beautiful. And as I say, the sun was shining, so everything just looked stunning. And I got down to the ferry port there quite early, wandered about for a bit, took some pictures down on the marina or whatever, you know, loads of very rich people keeping boats moored up there. Very, very nice indeed. And someone was having a bit of a party when we were there. Very low-key party, but there was stuff kicking off anyway. It was pretty cool. And then over on the ferry, sat up on the top deck, which again, obviously, sunny day is going to be beautiful, right? And, you know, some families going across because it's obviously half term. So it was a really nice vibe. So we get over the other side. I made my way to Quay Arts, which is in Newport. And met up with Del, and then Steve showed up, actually. I think he'd gone to the hotel, then he came back. So put all the gear in, then I wandered to the hotel, which was very nice. And then wandered back to sound check, and we kicked off about 7:30. And actually when I was playing, Steve and Russ Tarley came along with Steve as well to take some clips and stuff like that for his social medial, as they say in Bristol, social medial. Yeah, I was just warming up, and then I had my in-ears in and I was playing along and turned around, and all of a sudden there was Mark, like a ghost. I was like, oh. So he was like, oh, sorry, just wanted to come and say hi. So thanks, Mark, for sorting this. And thanks for Del Seymour as well for sorting it out, booking it and making it happen. And also the aptly named Steve Smith, who was our sound man, who was lovely. And we had, you know, about 30 or 40 people come along, which is great, you know, on a sunny, Thursday evening. The drummers all came together to come along. You know, it's like, what are you doing? I'm at home. No, you're not. You're going to come along and see this Steve and Rob drum masterclass. Get your arse in gear. And as ever, you know, afterwards, we met the people who came along. Everyone was lovely, sharing stories of the island, sharing stories of takeaways, because I was absolutely starving because I never eat before a show. I didn't realise that everything shut quite early on the island. But as I say, Del and Steve and all the people that came along were just fantastic. And in a way, if it could have worked out, I'd like to have stayed on the island a little bit longer because there's so much to see. And that coastline is beautiful. As I say, the sun was shining. But alas, I had to get back on the ferry on Friday afternoon, get myself back here. And I was working again on Saturday and obviously teaching again on Sunday. But as I've always said, you know, thanks so much for all the drummers coming out. The drumming community sticks together, you know, they support each other, and that's just a wonderful thing. And me and Steve had a great time. And we've got one more coming up, I think, in Dorchester, which I'll do a little clip on in a week's time or so. But yeah, what can I say? Thank you, the Isle of Wight. Thank you to the drummers there. What a lovely place. You are living in a kind of paradise there. Though I should imagine it gets a bit busy when the festival's there, but that's kind of cool too, isn't it? You know, good for local businesses and so on. So yeah, and if you're interested in booking Steve and myself for a masterclass or clinic, then do get in touch. You can contact me on the email, which I'll either put here or I'll put it at the end. And just contact us, and, you know, we're both sort of not free because we're both busy, but we've both got times in the diary which could be filled with something like masterclasses in clinics, because they're so much fun to do. And me and Steve are having a blast working together, because we both realised that, you know, we've been doing it a long time, and you know, in certain situations when you're working with other drummers, like clinics, masterclasses, you know, workshops, drum shows, sometimes one of the people, or if there's two other drummers, well, whatever, the ego can rise to the surface. Now, we've all got egos. I've talked about this before. It's necessary to have that because it feeds you to practice and pushes you to do better. But when it comes out in some sort of drum battle kind of vibe, and even, you know, looking back at, me and Steve were talking, actually Steve brought this up, the Gene Krupa and Buddy Rich so-called drum battles for the Jazz at the Philharmonic. Neither of them wanted to do it, you know, because Gene obviously was aware of Buddy's technique, and Buddy had complete respect for Gene, because he knew he wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for Gene pushing the whole drummer to the foreground, you know, of the band, and making a drum solo a thing. But it was good for ticket sales, you know, two of the most famous drummers at that time, you know, going for it as a trade-off, like, come on, who's going to win? All that sort of nonsense. And I think it was the same with the Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson stuff as well, you know. And I think anyone that was up against, whether, you know, you're a Buddy fan or not, that doesn't really matter. You know, if you just take away the style of the music and just gave a person a drum kit, you know, whoever this may be, and say play, you know, I don't think anyone can deny that his technique was just phenomenal, whether you like it or not. It was just, you know, as I say, forget the swing music, forget the big band thing, forget any stories you know about him. If he just walked into a room and sat behind a 5-piece kit, 4-piece kit, or just a snare drum and played, you know, you'd be knocked out by what he did. There's no way you can look at it and say it's rubbish. It might not be your style or something you enjoy, but it is what it is, you know. And I think anybody who was placed in a situation where, hey, you've got to play next to Buddy, would have been a bit like, ooh. And Buddy was, I think, equally embarrassed that he was so good. It's almost like, I don't know how I do this, but I can do this, and this is what I do. And and I think if it's seen as some sort of competition, it's kind of, you know, you're out. And if, as I say, you're next to Buddy, you know what you're up against, so you sort of stay in your lane, as I heard Harvey Mason say in an interview with Vinny just the other day. You should check out, I'm sure you all do anyway, I'm quite late to the party, but Vinny's podcast, Breakfast with Vinny, I think it's called. It's brilliant. And I was watching, when I was down in Exeter the other day, which I'll talk about on another clip, I was watching, as I was sort of having breakfast in my room, I was watching an interview with him and Harvey Mason, and that was great. And they were talking about staying in their lane. So anyway, yeah, so me and Steve don't have that, basically. The long and the short of it, we just decided that we would have a little kind of duet at the end. That's the way to look at it. He said, I'm just going to play like a New Orleans-y thing, and you know, let's just go for it. And I said, listen, I want to keep it musical. One of the best ones I ever did at the end of a show was at Bath Spa University, when I was on with Ralph Salmins. He's a stunning player and a lovely guy. And he just said, listen, I'm not into, I said, no, listen, I said, whatever you do, you go first. You set something up, and I'm just going to pick up the brushes. And I remember his face was like, oh, right. I said, all the mallets, I'm going to be all sort of cinematic and filmic on my end. And then maybe I pick some sticks up, and let's make it a real dynamic kind of thing, you know, and like a mood fest. And I did the same. I picked up the brushes, and there's a little clip which I'll share here, which was sent to me by Jamie Woodford. So thank you for sharing this with me, Jamie. So I'll put this on in a second. You could see a little bit of us kind of just working together. It isn't an ego fest, it's just seeing what happens. And the fact that we were both looking at each other and smiling, like Steve would play a little phrase, you know, maybe put a little bell strike at the end or something, or, you know, just something that shows, you know, sense of humor. I was doing the same. And that felt good. And I think the audience vibed off of that, rather than, you know, the aura between the two drummers being, I'm going to play you, man, and all that. You know, that's just, because we've both got chops, right? We both can do stuff. But because we're on a different level mentally, with that stuff. We just don't see it. You know, when we do our individual 45 minutes or an hour each in the masterclass, that's when we do our thing, you know. And when you're working together as two pro players, you know, there's no need for all that nonsense. And I'm really enjoying working with Steve. He's such a lovely man, and I'm learning a lot from him as well. Wildwood, I secretly told him the other day that that was my favourite Paul Weller album, and always will be. Though obviously Paul Weller's catalogue is great, and the other stuff he did with Steve or whatever he's doing now, great. But Wildwood landed at a good time for me. I think the drums sound great on it. The fact that it was recorded without clicks is brilliant. It's just got a real 60s, 70s vibe, which I suppose is what they were going for, and they succeeded, and it's one of my favourite albums. So yeah, so working with Steve is just wicked, and of course the Star Council stuff. Anyway, I'm turned into a fan now, a fanboy. Shouldn't do that. Anyway, so once again, thanks to Del, Steve, everyone for coming. Thanks to Mark W for setting up the communication to start between me and Del. I thank you very much. I thank the people of the Isle of Wight. You were lovely. And that's the end of this video. It took me a little while to get it together because, again, I've been busy and just chilling, really, just trying to take some time out because there's lots going on. So have a great weekend and enjoy your drumming, enjoy life, stay well, stay happy, and I shall see you all on the next video. Thanks for tuning in, and also please like, subscribe and share, all the usual stuff. Take care, guys. Bye.